Welcome to the Student of the Game podcast, where we break down the lives, strategies, and advice of successful individuals who are students of their own game and masters of their own craft. My name is Tim Stone. My co-hosts are Nick Galbreath and Ian Cushing. Let's get ready to learn and grow.
My name is Nick Galbreath with my co-host Tim Stone, and we have the pleasure to have on our podcast Renato Geromel.
Right.
Pleasure you being here, man.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah, so I met Renato a few weeks ago at a Grant Cardone event down in Miami, and he's got an awesome story. He's all into real estate, and he would love to just come on this podcast and tell the students, what he's learned. So thank you, Renato, for being here. And if you don't mind, let's just go ahead and jump into your story. We like to start the podcast from everything before the college years, leading up to the college years, and then we'll stop there and maybe dive a little bit deeper. Would you mind doing that?
Awesome. Sounds good. Yeah, that'd be great. So my background, talking a little bit about me, I grew up in Brazil. So São Paulo, Brazil, pretty big city. But my family has a construction company down there, and that's kind of a little bit how my real estate came about. So I grew up as a little kid in Brazil. My family have a construction company. They build multifamily communities. In Brazil, the multifamily sector is not really there, but they basically build these communities and they sell as condos. So some of the buildings they rent it out, and then they start selling them off as condos. So that's kind of how I started. Just grew up into that, and of course the business grew tremendously as I was growing up. So I got the opportunity to see some pretty incredible construction projects going on. Right now they build mainly high rises, so 20 stories and up, so fairly large construction buildings, and that was a blessing for me. But I didn't want to stay in Brazil because I knew that I would have, I had more capability of grow if I move away. So in high school, I decided to go to be an exchange student, and that's kind of how I kind of fell into being in the U.S. Freedom was always a big thing for me, and I knew that just growing up in Brazil, the freedom was not exactly there. I had came to U.S. a couple of times, like Disney, the typical like vacation from an international little kid, and I got super amazed of everything's big here. There's so much opportunity, and I was like, I gotta do something different. So I was 14 years old. I decided I gotta jump in and try to basically get a seat on a U.S. school. So that's kind of how I came here. I came here first for international student in a high school, and then from there I was like, I gotta find my way to stay here, and college was a way for me to do that. So I ended up going to be in a construction environment. So I got my basically a civil engineering degree. It's called architectural engineering. So I got specialties in electrical and a little bit of civil. Structural side. So that's kind of how I got into the multifamily from construction till now. And I always thought that construction was it was the way for me to really be within the multifamily community. So that's a little bit of my background in a nutshell.
Yeah, so a lot of times we don't hear people that know, from the time that they're a child that they want to stay in real estate. A lot of people, maybe their parents invest in real estate or a family member, and then they sort of figured out along the way. But it sounds like you went to college knowing this is my path to get into it. And then, so what kind of jobs did you get into out of college, or what did your situation look like? Did you just go straight into becoming an entrepreneur and doing business, or did you pick up some construction jobs?
No, so construction was always my passion. I love to see things being built. But there is, everywhere in real estate, there's so many ways of making money. Construction is one of them, but, there's different sectors, Airbnb, multifamily, and whatnot. Because I was international, I thought that, college was the way for me to really grow. And then, and I needed to learn more of how the process kind of happened here in US, because that was different than in Brazil. And of course I didn't have any connections here, for the majority of my time. I mean, when I moved here, I knew no English. Like, I came to school here, I basically knew nothing of English, and I was forcing to learning English within the next 4 to 6 months, that's when I started getting the hand of it. But I didn't have anybody. So I was like, okay, college is going to be my way to basically my gap for me to get somewhere. So graduating, right after graduation, I basically got an engineering degree doing development for multifamily, a lot of hospitality and hospitals as well. So I started by doing basically design drawings, for this kind of facilities. And I started looking at multifamily buildings, and that was really kind of became my passion just because of the potential that there is in there. So I kept asking, hey, can I work more on multifamily buildings? So I worked on that for 7 years. And the last like year and a half to 2 years, basically all I did was multifamily. So just multifamily design and a lot of electrical within multifamily, and then a lot of the technology stuff as well, which right now they call like the tech packages and all that. So I did a lot of that from the back end kind of thing.
That's awesome. Renato, I guess just kind of backing up a little bit, from moving from Brazil to the United States, not knowing any English, kind of submerging yourself in a new environment. It doesn't sound like any family was in the United States at the time. You just kind of came over here and just kind of figured things out. What were some struggles that you've had just kind of coming to the United States? And I mean, it seems like you just had your mindset on construction and I'm going to get in this field. What were some struggles you had with communication and, growing your network and just going from there?
Yeah, man. Whenever I came in here in high school, it was like the main struggle was really the language. First of all, I had no idea what was going on. For the good of like 3 to 4 months, it was like, trying to get food basically. I had a host family, but it was a lot of like, mimic and like just trying to figure out my ways. So that was a struggle there. But of course, like everything in life, as soon as you start doing more and more, you just, kind of learn from it. And then afterwards, it was really trying to figure out a way for me to stay here because I liked it here so much. I saw the potential. I wanted to, create relationships and things like that. But I was always seen as like the guy from outside, just because I didn't know, what I did every day for most of my life back then was different than, what a high school student here would, was doing on a day to day. So I kind of had to learn their, what people like to do, so I created like a relationship. So that was definitely, a mind shift that I had to do and just, learn the steps and creating community. I think just getting into groups was the main, growing up, I was very like shy as a person. So it was hard for me to get into different communities. But as soon as I figured out, okay, hey, I can be in a real estate club like you guys have, I can be in all these different clubs within, the community or within school, and just creating relationships, which is, real estate is all about relationships. The more relationships that you create, you are able to get better deals. You're able to, nobody closes a real estate deal that is worth something by themselves. They're going to need a loan. They're going to need to have the relationship. They're going to need to, find a partner. They're going to need somebody to manage. It's all about relationships. And it was a struggle in the beginning, just as a day-to-day relationship building. But in real estate is, it's a lot about those things that you learn in life is, let's create these different relationships because, together we can get way better deals than we can by ourselves.
Absolutely. And what were some of those groups that you kind of submerged yourself in, going through high school and college? Any like particular groups that you wound up in, or?
Some interesting ones was, I was always interested in investment. So I had a guy actually from Brazil in my school, the only other guy from Brazil that came to my college. He created like an investment club. So I got into that club and learned a little bit of investments. And that's kind of how I like real estate way better now because I knew more about other types of investments. As soon as you step out of your comfort zone, you kind of learn something else, or you learn to like what you know better, or you learn other perspectives, which is always good. So that was an interesting one. And then I was always fan of like extreme sports and different things like that. So those are some of the clubs that I got, really good friends with, and to today, I really like some of those things. And even in real estate, there's some clubs like that they go up beyond your comfort zone. Like instead of you going to like a conference or something that sit down, have a presentation kind of thing, you take a trip, you have more like a easygoing environment, you create better relationships, right? So I really like doing those, even within
like Secret X.
Secret X, exactly.
We had David on the podcast. I think it was the last episode that we filmed, and he mentioned Secret X. I think he's wearing a hat that said it. You want to talk a little bit about it? I know it's invite only, but it's a really cool thing that he does for.
Yeah, I got the hat sitting around as well. So Secret X is pretty incredible. David is the guy that puts it together, within a couple other guys as well. But yeah, I learned, I got to know a lot of good people through Secret X. Is basically, like I was saying, different than the everyday conference that you go to. We just, we go somewhere in the planet and we have no idea what's going to happen. We know that's a bunch of entrepreneurs, go-getters kind of people, because they kind of vet those people out, right? They want people that are going to be willing to provide value to other people. And that's really what it's about, creating the relationships. So they choose a location. We go to that location. We have no idea what's going to happen. That's why it's secret experience, right? But they create experiences that we are able to come together and kind of create a relationship within the trip. So in a regular environment, like a sit down conference, you don't really get to know the person on a personal level. And that's what this trip kind of does to you. You end up really getting to know people on a personal level. And it's better to do business with people that you know personally than people that you don't know. And it's kind of how it come about. Yeah. So it's a great experience. If you have a chance to go, I'll definitely recommend that one.
Yeah, they say you do business with people that you know, like, and trust.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the first step is to know each other.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And just kind of pointing out something about I just kind of realized from you, Renato, is just the habits that you created with the certainty of I'm going to go over to the United States, figure this out, go to college, get something in construction, and also being comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's just wired in your mind. That's a habit that you just consistently can go about. And just with all the listeners listening right now, that is just so gold. It's like some gold nuggets right there. Is being comfortable being uncomfortable. And what was the first thing I just said that just totally dissipated across my mind?
While you catch up on that, but what I can say is that, like, just growing up in a different country, right?
Yeah.
You kind of see that, not everything is fun and games, right? So I grew up in a society there's a very large division between like the very poor and the very rich. There's not really the middle class is not really existent, or you are like middle lower class, or you're like upper high class kind of thing. So the division is not really there. And I was kind of in that middle class, but that's something that is disappearing there. So it was like I really have to learn to become uncomfortable so that I can go beyond that. And it's it's a society it's hard for you to get connections. It's not the same as here that people are open to teaching you. The podcast community is not really there. There's not you guys trying to put amazing content out there to teach other people, hey, let's come together and learn from one another kind of thing. So that's kind of how it came together. But I don't know if you remember your thoughts there.
Yeah, and I was just kind of re-say the habit of certainty. You just the certain that you're going to figure things out. I mean, I think that's so important. So again, all the listeners listening, that's amazing stuff. And because I guess just kind of continuing your story, Renato, of kind of what you're doing now. through your different ventures that you're doing through construction and the multifamily development. Was that correct? Multifamily development is kind of what you're focusing on right now. But
so I went to school for engineering, right? Mm-hmm. And whenever I graduated, so I worked on that I worked through a company that did basically the drawings for multifamily development, as well as like hospitality and hospitals as well. Right now, what I basically do is I work with, I have a fund that we work with international investors mainly. There's some US investors as well, but we're trying to get the word out there, because I grew up there. I know that this kind of environment is not available there. So we're giving the opportunity for people to invest in assets here. So it's basically, a way for, they don't have to invest on everyday available in Brazil, but otherwise we can teach them about, how real estate works here and have them passively invest here, in an easy way.
Yeah. So you're doing something that has pretty much never been done for the people of Brazil, like a new opportunity. And there's a quote, the quote says, "Don't be afraid to suck at something new." Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's been, like the story of your life. Everything you've been doing is something new that, like whatever, like you're not good at English when you came to America, like that's just part of it. And if you were afraid, like, oh, I don't speak the language, I don't know how I'm going to communicate, maybe you would have never come, maybe you would have never had the same opportunities. So like the quote says, don't be afraid to suck at something new, because you just learn and you get better. And that's just like, that's the thing I keep seeing in your story, is that you're doing something new that's never been done, and you're finding success in it, and you're bringing opportunities to other people, because you're the first person that wasn't afraid to suck at it and to learn and to become good at it. Is that something that sort of goes along with what you've experienced?
Yeah, exactly. Like what comes back to what Nick and you guys were, talking about. I ask myself, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Mm-hmm. Like whenever I was moving here, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing, I'm just going to go back to where I was, or it's going to become better, or it's going to be the same. You're never going to, if you actually, there's a saying that says, if you don't quit, you never fail. So it's kind of, go back to the same thing. Hey, if you don't do something, you're already failing by not doing it. Mm-hmm. Right? So, what's the worst thing that can happen? I try to ask that myself every day. And, what can I do today that it's going to propel me a little bit further?
Absolutely. I just want to throw a little quote out there by Wayne Gretzky. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
It's so true. And there's a thing that Grant Cardone says in his sales training. And a couple of days ago, I was trying to make a sale over the phone, and Chris Albert was sitting next to me, and he thought it was hilarious. But I just went really hard for the close, and the dude just, he was not ready to pay for it. But I was like, you can't hit a home run if you don't swing, like that's just how it is. Like, you can't hit a home run if you don't swing. You can't make the shot if you don't take it. So that's just, you learn a lot of lessons from that quote, as often as it is said. A lot of times quotes become pretty cliche because people say them so much, but the reason people say them so much is because they're so true. Like, you do miss every shot you don't take because you'll never score.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's a little bit cliche, but let that sink in, and like, what does that actually represent to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, I love that quote. You can't hit a home run if you don't swing. And I swung really hard, and I struck out, but it was a fun experience.
And I mean, you're gonna learn from it, right?
Oh yeah, and I'll swing again.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe the guy, you're not losing anything by doing it. The guy's not gonna. You can always do it again.
No, I've been on the phone with that guy since. We'll close him. I just got to keep swinging.
Exactly.
So Renato, so kind of getting in, to your amazing opportunity that you're bringing to your country, Brazil. I guess raising money from international investors and kind of coming to the United States. What are you investing, I guess, targeting in the United States actively right now?
So right now we're looking mainly at multifamily.
Okay.
So the reason I right now I live in the Midwest, but my goal is to move to Florida. So we're actually planning that pretty soon here. So we're targeting Florida mainly because Brazilians are comfortable with Florida. Most of there's a lot of Brazilians in Florida. Brazilians travel to Florida, so it's an easy environment to basically sell them, right? Because that's what they know mostly about. And I just love how Florida is growing so much. There's so much population growth there, and a lot of opportunity there. So we're targeting large multifamily complexes, so 100 plus units, so that we can provide this value to Brazilians basically. And then partnering with people that are already in the market, not necessarily in the Florida market, but in the multifamily market, that we can come together and buy multifamily deals. So we have not closed anything in Florida yet, but there's a couple of things that are very close there. Can't announce them yet specifically, but there's some nice hitters in there. And I just I just love the multifamily market. That's when I was in engineering on my W-2 job. Right now I'm not anymore, but when I was there, I invested a little bit of my own money into this kind of syndication setups, and I started looking at the value, and that's kind of how I learned how multifamily is so valuable. You have the potential of really choosing your appreciation, right, based on rents and NOI. So that's an incredible thing that you quite don't see on any other type of investment, on any other type of investments really. And I got fascinated by that, and by investing on it myself, I kind of learned throughout the process with other syndicators, and I was like, hey, I gotta do that on my own, and I really gotta bring that to Brazil because people don't have the opportunity to invest in anything like that there. And right now they really cannot invest in anything here either. A lot of people buy property in Florida, but they buy single family and then they rent out as an Airbnb, which generally speaking is a great opportunity. But if you think about that, they're 5,000 miles away. If something happens to their Airbnb here, it's not really like, hey, I'm across the street, I can just or a quick flight away, I can kind of figure things out. They're pretty far away, and what happens is that they end up usually leaving those houses with property management, that kind of thing. It's not very well managed. Multifamily would just be a way for them to be completely passive, which is really what they want. Most Brazilians don't want to be active because they're so far away.
Yeah. And could you talk a little bit about the logistics of raising capital internationally? Because I'd imagine it may get a little tricky, or maybe it's a little different than doing it from U.S. investors. What's that look like?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. I don't know how much you guys in your audience knows about the different, SEC regulations and all that kind of thing. So there's definitely different SEC regulations. So the most common in US is like 5. I'm not an attorney or anything like that, so don't quote me in specific on these things. But there's different, the most used here like 506B, 506C, which is for accredited and non-accredited investors. For international investors, a very similar kind of regulation, right? But it's called Reg S. So that allows you to basically raise money, raise capital from international investors. Generally speaking, they do not have to be accredited, but there's some interesting things when it comes to taxes, because there's some taxes you have to hold for them because they're not technically, citizens of US. So that, that's a way of them doing that. The other way is really figuring out a way for a lot of them. They want to have money in US because they come so much here. Usually, whenever you're talking about people that want to invest in Brazil, from Brazil, they have some type of, they have quite a bit of money they're willing to invest. So they want to have a bank account here. They want to have kind of money here because they travel here pretty often. So it's really about teaching them about this opportunity, and that they can actually, as international investors, have a bank account here, and they can invest that way as well.
Okay.
So there's
one of my
but It gets a little bit nitty gritty.
Okay, thank you. One of my favorite parts of the podcast is when a term or a definition comes up that we haven't talked about on a previous episode. So you mentioned accredited investors. Would you mind explaining for the audience the definition of an accredited investor?
Yeah, definitely. So accredited investors, for you to be an accredited investor, you basically have to have a net worth of above $1 million, or you have to have, as a single person, a revenue of at least 200,000, or if you're married, 300,000. And that revenue you have had to have that for the past 2 years, if I believe. I think that's correct. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah,
but
I think so. So what is the reason that they distinguish between accredited and non-accredited investors, and why are there two separate ways to raise money between those?
Yeah, so the different SEC regulations, what they divide between accredited and non-accredited, just because the way the regulation is written, like you have to follow the rules of the SEC. But non-accredited, whenever you do non-accredited investors, you cannot go out and advertise. And in accredited, you can just go out and advertise. It's basically to protect investors. That's what it was created for. So it technically is a lower risk investment. That's at least it's what it's told for all investors. Hey, it's a lower risk investment whenever it's for non-accredited. That's not necessarily true, but that's what the SEC follows, guides. If you are opening up a fund, or if you have interest in opening up a fund, I highly recommend talking to a lawyer, to a SEC attorney, because they are gonna really be able to tell you like which way you should go, one way or another, because there's a lot of like nitty gritty aspects of it, and you really should know what you're doing before you just jump and do it. That's
awesome. Yeah, the way I see it, like the SEC really just wants to protect the non-accredited investors, because in their eyes, if you have a net worth of $1 million, or if you make over 200,000, 300,000 a year, you should be a little bit smarter with money in theory. But if you're not making that much money, like losing it all would be much more devastating than it would be to an accredited investor, who should be like, those are the keywords, should be a little more sophisticated as far as money and investments go. So it's just a little differentiation to protect people is what it is.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they just want to protect people, but there's a lot of large organizations behind it as well. So take it with a grain of salt, I would say. Learn a lot about it. There's a lot of
and talk to a lawyer.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that is key there.
Absolutely, and thank you for breaking that down. And honestly, Renato, if you could even break down the SEC for the audience, because I don't know if we've ever talked about the SEC before on this podcast.
Oh, yeah, man. Like what is it? Is it the football league, or what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Why is the SEC so important in real estate?
So the SEC is not necessarily a real estate company. It's just based on investments, right? I'm going to Google here what it actually stands for, because I don't even remember. SEC.
I believe it's the Securities and Exchanges Commission, but go ahead and Google it in case I'm wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're right. Securities and Exchange Commission. So they basically regulate, all different type of investment that's going on. So if you have a public company, you basically have to file with the SEC. So if you invest in a public company, look at like SEC, every single public company is going to have like an SEC, description basically. That's gonna tell you how you're investing and all that kind of stuff. But within real estate, you can have exemptions, and that's kind of what we follow whenever we are filing to have an SEC exemption to raise money for real estate.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that, Renato. And going back to creating personal experiences like the Secret X the Secret X group. And when you're talking about just talking with other syndicators and just making that personal connection with the individual, creates such a magical relationship and just opens up a wealth of knowledge and so many opportunities from that relationship. And I think you really hit the hammer on the head of just talking about how important it was to create that personal connection with people in the same, with the same goals and aspirations as you do. So I think that was very fascinating.
Yeah, I would say relationship, especially, in anything that you do in life, but especially in real estate, relationship is everything. Another interesting quote, right? You are the 5 people you surround yourself with. It's more likely in real estate that if you surround yourself with people that are doing deals, that are looking to do deals, that have similar mindset, you're going to, learn from them and become what they are, looking to do. So whenever I'm surrounding myself with people and trying to create relationships, I always look in a way as to, how can I provide value to you? There's large syndicators that, they may be in a lot of places around the country, but hey, if I can, find a deal for them in a different area that they are not necessarily familiar with, or if I can, manage one of their deals, if I can be a knowledge whenever they're doing, revamps, different construction projects and things like that. It's just, it's some value that I can provide to them that it's gonna broaden a relationship, and it's really the best way for you to get to know them and really being able to provide some value and have an exchange, basically.
Yeah. And last night I was talking to the real estate club about why relationships are so important, and what it's because people are so important, in everything, and specifically in business, because businesses don't make decisions, people make decisions, and people run on emotions, and you need relationships to sort of get in and be on their side, on their side of their emotions, hey, I like this guy, let's work with this guy. That's all it takes is for a person to decide they like you and they want to work with you. So that's why the relationship is so important, because it's people making decisions. And a lot of times people think there's this big company, and this big company would never talk to you. But yeah, the company will never talk to you, but there's people within the company that make all the decisions, and that's how the world works. And I guess sometimes people don't think of it that way, but relationships control everything in business, and especially real estate. People always say, all the time you'll hear, real estate is a relationship business. And that's why. It's because people make decisions, and people run on relationships, and people run on emotions. And that's a way that the world works. But I guess everybody doesn't realize that, and people need a reminder, or people need to be taught that, that's how it is. That's how business goes.
Exactly. Yeah. And, in your everyday life, you can never imagine who are you really around with, the person, your neighbor can be a great relationship for you to, maybe he's in real estate. You have no idea unless you go and talk to them, that's why people join this kind of groups, because they, creating those relationships, that's how you're gonna, get to, the nicer, the nicer job, that's how you're going to be able to find the guy that represents a certain company. Because just like you said, there's people that make decisions, not, there's a lot of people behind companies, and it's really, you're really you're a couple people away from wherever you want to go.
Exactly.
It's crazy whenever you look at LinkedIn and you're just hey, this person knows this person that you can get to this person that you want to know. It's just a matter of creating those links.
Yeah, and one thing I thought of when you're saying why the relationships are important to get to where you want, with your neighbor, maybe your neighbor is not in real estate, but maybe your neighbor is available to watch your dog while you drive down to Florida to go network and meet people. Everyone can have an important role, and you can do the same thing for them. Maybe you're in real estate and maybe they don't care about real estate. Maybe you watch their dog while they go do whatever they need to do, spend time with family, work on their business. And, that's just, like relationships work that way. Like you could pay someone to watch your dog. You're like, well, I don't want to pay to watch the dog, so I'm just going to stay home this weekend. I'm not going to network. Like, what would that cost you? Or just your neighbor that you're friendly with, and they're like, yeah, I'll watch your dog anytime. Like, go down to Miami. That just having that relationship opens up so many doors, not only just in business, but just to, help each other out and live your life supported by the people around you. And you can do so much more with other people's support than you can just by trying to figure it out on your own, or by doing nothing because you don't want to rely on other people.
Definitely, yeah. And if you always go from the ways of like, how can I provide value? You're always gonna, even though you are trying to provide value, like both people are always gonna win. So I always approach from, sometimes a lot of people just want to, gain knowledge, and it's like, oh, this person's not for me. But if you always approach from the way of, hey, how can I provide value to you? You're always gonna win something. You're gonna win knowledge. You're gonna win relationship. There's always something there that but always approach from the way as, how can I provide value to everybody that you surround yourself with? Because they're gonna try to they're gonna try to provide value to you in reciprocity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And just being positive, having that positive energy, just going in any conversation. It's amazing how it brightens someone's day and just completely changes the complete outlook of just looking at somebody and having that weird eye-to-eye conversation with just going up and say, hey, my name's Nick. Just starting a relationship and just bringing that positive energy just leads so many directions. And kind of changing into that, Tim, unless you had any more questions about strategy, I was kind of going into what were some early struggles you had of just starting your fund? Talking to Brazilian investors, friends and family, friends of family. What were some early struggles and that you had with talking and just selling that vision, and then coming back over the United States and talking to syndicators? If you could kind of elaborate on that. I know that was a long question, but
yeah, we can kind of elaborate on that a little bit, and feel free to ask me again if I forget something. But so it's like anything that you do, right? You don't know until you start doing it. So the first thing that I didn't know was basically, hey, I don't know about the SEC and what they represent, how I'm gonna really get into that, how I'm gonna do something correct. And as you heard a little bit before, I still don't know everything. I still don't know exactly what the SEC stands for. It's always about taking that step and learn a little bit along the way. But talking to people and learning from accountants and attorneys of how can I do this correctly. That was the first thing. How can I bring this to Brazil and do it properly? That was definitely something that I didn't know. But then whenever going to the to the investor side, a lot of Brazilians and even Americans don't know how to even get started on investing on multifamily or any real estate by that means. So it's like, because there's so much noise in the world, there's a lot of different opportunities that people listen to, stock market and a bunch of different financial advisors. You got to invest here, you got to invest there. So there's a lot of noise out there. And then really explain to people that, hey, there is a lot of potential in this field. If you don't know invest in real estate yet, how does that process really work? If you're gonna do by yourself, or if you're gonna do through a syndicator, or whatever that means to you. It's really about really explaining to people on a genuine way as to how they do it, what the process is gonna be, and really being like an open-minded to people, that they can ask questions and they can come to with anything really, because people that are just starting, they have no idea. Because you learn a bunch of things by listening to podcasts and being in clubs, a lot about real estate, but the people that you're trying to show your vision may not. So you really have to be open to show to them what's possible. And that's a struggle that's I live it every day. I try to talk to new investors and like, well, but I can just buy a house. Yeah, you can. But there's other ways of investing in real estate too. There's there's Airbnb. There's a lot of noise in general, and it's really, you should give a genuine advice to people so that they can create their own decisions. You should be able to provide what's available, and because people are smart enough to create their own decisions, but they don't necessarily have all the pieces to the puzzle together to create their decision. So that's definitely my largest everyday struggle, just really teaching people, especially Brazilians, because even the asset class that I'm in, which is multifamily, it's not really existent in Brazil. So there, you can't just go out and buy a multifamily building like you can here. There's so many different apartment complexes here that people are very familiar with this kind of, even if they're not invested in, maybe they rent from a different complex. Well, that is not really available there. People rent out condos and they rent out houses. So there's not one single owner of a complex. So just to explain to them that this is possible is definitely a good start. And then we can, whenever you start drilling down on like, hey, there's so much potential in appreciation and cash flow and tax advantages, then you get them lost. So you have to go step by step down the way.
Absolutely. And what advice would you give to our listeners, Renato, on focusing on your goals and expectations of yourself?
Yeah. So, your goals, you're never going to achieve your goals if you do not know what they are. So what I tell people is that I write my goals every day, actually twice a day, whenever I get up and before I go to bed. Like, I write my goals as I have accomplished them every single day. Because if I know my goals, I have way better chance of me to actually achieving them. So that's the first step, right? Really sitting down and what do you actually want? Like, I even have a thing behind here. I know in the podcast you guys are not going to be able to see it, but behind my desk I have basically like a goal. I don't even know what that's called. It's like a drawing. My wife actually made it for me with like all my visions, basically.
Oh, vision board.
A vision board, exactly.
Yeah.
So she literally drew for me, what I want, like the jet, the boat, everything that I can possibly, everything that I write it down every day on my goals. She drew that for me, so I can, every time I get up and I sit on my desk, I can see that, and it becomes very real whenever you see exactly what you want. Mm-hmm. So I really like to break it down and like, hey, I want to, have something. I want to be able to, provide to my family. Okay, what does that mean? Yeah. How many different connections I have to do today for me to be able to get there. Mm-hmm. But really, the first step is that you figuring out what your goals are, and really writing them down and visualizing that you can do that. I know there was a second part to the question, and I just lost it there.
I just wanted to say one thing, Renato. So I write down my goals down every day as well. And one thing I've noticed is that I never seem to hit my goals because, like, once you start writing them down, you very quickly get really close to them. You're like, well, if I'm hitting it this quickly, I need to raise my goal. And it's like you never hit your goals once you start figuring out what you want and writing them down because they become so achievable. And you're like, well, I need to aim bigger. Is that something that you've sort of run into as you've been writing down your goals?
Yeah, I as I always write it down like targets as well, which targets are like that you can get done every day. Mm-hmm. But I always have been a big believer like, hey, I gotta shoot for the moon kind of thing. So I've always had pretty big goals. So in the beginning time, whenever I started writing my goals, I was kind of that way. I wrote some goals and got them accomplished, and I was like, okay, what do I actually want? So now like my goals are pretty big. I mean, I have I think I can achieve them, but they're pretty far there. It's gonna take some time for me to get there.
Renato, we'd love to hear it. And I guess the next question is, what is your end goal?
I mean, one of my big things is to provide to people things like that. That's my everyday goal, right? I achieve that every day. Is I want to provide to people in Brazil of something I did not have the option to do. You know, if they want to invest in something in the US, that's something I want to provide to them. But that's an ongoing kind of goal, right? But on the bigger picture for me is freedom. You know, I grew up in a place that did not have freedom, so I want to have freedom of place, time, and finances. You know, which is, to me, that's a pretty big statement, because that means I, have to produce a lot. I have to have a jet, for example.
Yep, freedom of location.
Exactly. So it's pretty far out there, and it's good because it drives me to do better and produce every day.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And I want to say I can word this right, but what is your favorite biggest mistake you've made? I think there's a little more to that question, but we're gonna roll with it.
My favorite biggest mistake. That's a good one. I mean, I have a lot of mistakes, that's for sure. I think my biggest one was to probably never to be out there. I very recently have been more try to be out there, like being in this podcast, right? Probably like a year and a half, 2 years ago, I would not have done that, because I grew up in a way, my parents were always like, hey, keep it to yourself, don't talk to strangers kind of setup. And, people around you really have everything that you want. So I think my biggest mistake was really not going out and talking to people and being available to provide value, because I didn't know that, hey, if I was able to provide value to people, they would come back and, create a relationship, first of all, but also provide value back to me. It seems something very, simple, but in the scheme of things, that have cost me a lot of time and money.
Absolutely. And what does that trigger in your mind that might come up? Is this, kind of like what you said a year and a half ago, you obviously had some kind of, I wouldn't call it like a self-doubt, but something like, oh, I'm not going to go meet those people. What is something in your mind that you say to yourself when you get that, thought come up in your head, that, that devil inside of your head? What do you do to block that out and just go do it? I mean, what do you say to yourself? Is there something that you say to yourself, or is
Yeah,
it just...
it's like what I said, like right before, right? What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
I always say that, like, what's the worst that can happen? If and that's very rarely going to happen. And if it really does happen, is that really that bad?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So another question is, what book have you given away the most, or at least recommended the most, if there's not one you've given away the most? But what book would you recommend so much that it'd be like the one that you would just give away to everybody if you could?
Okay, well, there's two books that kind of propelled to do a lot of things for me. So one of them is Rich Dad Poor Dad. Kind of changed my mindset on a lot of things. And then the other one, which is the book that I give away the most, actually, is the 10X Rule. I actually have a bunch of copies behind here. And I'm always giving that book away to people, just because I always think that, people goes back to the same thing on goals. People think very small usually, and then they think small, and then they try to do things that are small. And it's the next rule. What it really tells you is that, hey, if you want to achieve something, you have to do the work, like you're gonna have to achieve that 10 times. That's basically in a nutshell. So if you put 10 times the effort, you're gonna maybe achieve what you want. And that was kind of was like for me, and I'm very far away from doing 10 times what I should be doing. But it's, I always try, I read that book at least once a year, and always tries to propel me a little bit farther. It's definitely one of my favorites there. But if you have not read Rich Dad Poor Dad, that's like a classic. Everybody has to read that.
Yeah.
It should be a requirement in any like not even college. Like it should be like a middle school like requirement.
Yeah. I think you're like maybe our 14th guest to mention the book out of like 16 or 17. So like I say this every time. Like there is a reason everybody mentions Rich Dad Poor Dad. So if you haven't read it yet, like let me know, I'll buy it for you. You know?
Yeah, that's definitely a classic. You're gonna learn so much, not only in real estate, but just on like life. You know, how should you approach life in terms of finances, in terms of connections, relationship. It's a life's book. It's not only about real estate, but there is so many real estate nuggets within it. And every time you read it, every time I read that book, I learn something different, which is also interesting. You know, it seems, I have already read it. It just talks about, assets, liabilities. It's super simple, but every time you read it, you get a different nugget out of it.
Yeah, you know why that is? Because you changed.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's because you changed since the last time you read it. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I think people should, if you've read it, read it again, because it's definitely a good one. I'm not the only one saying it.
Yeah, it's probably, once we get some more numbers, it'll probably be like closer to 90% of everybody has recommended it. That's my projection.
Well, yeah, and if you're reading the business, 10X rule is very good too. So
yes,
definitely go for that one too.
Absolutely. And Renato, is there anything you would like to leave our listeners with today before we head out of here?
No, man. I just say, hey, if you're in this club, you're probably, a very good communicator. You're already doing the right thing because you're trying to reach out to other people. You're trying to, create connections, which if you like real estate, that's the way for you to get started, right? In anything that you do, create the connections, try to always provide value. You can always start real estate by just providing value to somebody. There's always going to be somebody that owns something, a piece of real estate, that they need somebody to help them manage, or help them find deals. So you don't need money to get started on the business. What you need is focus and drive, and that it's all on you, man. So if you have those two things and you're already here, so you're a good communicator and you're looking to create relationships, so you're in a good path. You just have to have focus and drive so you can do it.
Very powerful.
Awesome.
And Renato, if any of our listeners have questions, is there a good place to reach out to you at?
Yeah, definitely. So I am in all social media platforms, but what I'm most active is my Instagram. So my Instagram is Renato, Renato Geromel, Geromel Jr. So you can find me there. Feel free to shoot me a DM. I try to get to everybody's DMs, but that's definitely the best way to reach me. And I also have another Instagram, but it's mostly all in Portuguese, so I'm not gonna leave that one here because you guys are not gonna understand it. But you go to mine in there. You can also do some. You find my other one in there and see a little bit of what you're doing.
Awesome.
Thank you. This has been a great podcast. Tons of just amazing advice and good stories. So we really appreciate you taking the time to come chat with us.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys, man. It's a pleasure meeting you, Nick. And
pleasure meeting you too, Renato.
Yeah, always good to see you. All right, let's end it there. Thank you.